"Your Majesty, there's something in the archive you need to see." The words followed King Alexander Blackthorne long after the council meeting had ended. Few people dared interrupt him without warning. Fewer still sounded afraid when they did. Alexander stood alone in the highest tower of Blackthorne Palace, staring through a wall of glass at the sprawling lights of North Haven below. More than 2 million wolves lived under his rule. Every road, every border, every law carried his name. To the kingdom, he was the Alpha King, the strongest wolf alive, the man who had united rival territories and brought decades of stability. Yet as the city glowed beneath the cold autumn sky, the palace around him felt strangely empty. At 45, Alexander had everything a king could possess except the one thing power had never managed to buy back: time. The knock came precisely at 9 o'clock. "Enter." An elderly archivist stepped inside carrying a weathered leather box. His hands trembled. "We found this during the restoration of the Eastern Records Chamber, Your Majesty." Alexander frowned. "And?" The archivist swallowed. "It concerns Grace Carter." For a moment, the room seemed to lose all sound. Grace. No one spoke that name anymore. Not in the palace. Not in the kingdom. Not around him. 22 years had passed since he had last seen her. 22 years since she had vanished from his life, leaving behind questions no one could answer. Alexander slowly crossed the room. "Open it." The archivist carefully lifted the lid. Inside lay several yellow documents tied together with faded blue ribbon. Beneath them rested an old photograph. Alexander picked it up. His breath caught. Grace smiled back at him exactly as he remembered. Golden sunlight illuminated her pale skin and chestnut hair. She looked young, happy, alive. The sight hit him harder than any challenge he had ever faced. "Where was this hidden?" he asked quietly. "Inside a sealed compartment behind a false wall." Alexander's eyes moved to a folded envelope resting beneath the photograph. His name was written across the front in unmistakable handwriting. Grace's handwriting. His pulse quickened. Impossible. With careful fingers, he opened the envelope. A single sheet of paper waited inside. The ink had faded but remained readable. Alexander read the first line, then the second, then the third. The color drained from his face. The archivist shifted nervously. "Your Majesty?" Alexander never answered. He simply stared at the letter as though the world had tilted beneath his feet. One sentence echoed louder than every thought in his mind. "You have a daughter." The room felt suddenly too small. His daughter. Not had. Have. Present tense. Alive. Alexander read the sentence again. Then again. 22 years. 22 years he had ruled a kingdom without knowing his own child existed. His eyes dropped to the final attachment tucked behind the letter. Another photograph. This one newer. A young woman stood in front of a crowd holding a microphone. Her pale hair moved in the wind. Determination blazed in her blue eyes. She looked so much like Grace it almost hurt to see. At the bottom, someone had written a name. Evelyn Carter. Age 22. Alexander stared at the image, unable to look away. He had just discovered he had a daughter. What he did not know yet was that Evelyn Carter had spent her entire adult life fighting everything he represented. The Alpha system does not exist to protect people. It exists to protect itself. Applause erupted across the crowded auditorium. Hundreds of students, journalists, and community organizers rose to their feet. Some cheered. Others lifted their phones to record. At the center of the stage stood Evelyn Carter. She lowered the microphone slightly, waiting for the noise to settle. Confidence radiated from her in a way that could not be taught. She was 22 years old, but there was something older in her eyes. Something earned through years of disappointment, hard work, and difficult truths. The giant screen behind her displayed the title of her lecture: Reform, Accountability, and a Better Future. Evelyn glanced toward the audience and offered a small smile. "We cannot build a stronger society by pretending our institutions are perfect," she continued. "Real leadership listens. Real leadership changes. Real leadership admits when it is wrong." More applause followed. Near the back of the room, a man wearing a dark coat watched silently from the shadows. Few people paid attention to him. Even fewer would have recognized him without the royal insignia he normally wore. Alexander Blackthorne remained completely still. His eyes never left the young woman on stage. Every gesture reminded him of Grace. The way she tilted her head when making a point. The way her expression softened before speaking about something she cared deeply about. Even her smile carried traces of the woman he had once imagined spending his life with. Yet there was another realization settling heavily in his chest. Evelyn was nothing like him. She had built her identity in direct opposition to everything he represented. For the last 3 days, Alexander had reviewed every report available, every interview, every article, every public appearance. The picture became clearer with each passing hour. Evelyn Carter had become one of the most recognizable voices advocating for reform across the Northern Territories. She challenged powerful figures. She questioned old traditions. She criticized the concentration of authority within the monarchy, and she never seemed afraid of the consequences. The crowd laughed as Evelyn shared a story about a community project she had organized in a struggling neighborhood. Alexander found himself studying details no report had captured, the way people gravitated toward her, the genuine warmth in her interactions, the trust she inspired. She was not driven by ambition. She was driven by conviction. The realization filled him with pride he had no right to feel. He had not been there for her first steps, her first day of school, her victories, her failures, her dreams. Someone else had witnessed those moments. Someone else had occupied the place that should have belonged to a father. A sharp ache settled deep inside him. On stage, a moderator stepped forward. "One final question before we conclude." Evelyn nodded. A young reporter stood. "If you had the opportunity to speak directly to King Alexander Blackthorne, what would you say?" Laughter spread through the room. Evelyn smiled. Politely at first. Then her expression grew serious. Very serious. The room became quiet. Alexander felt his heartbeat slow. He already knew he would not like the answer. Evelyn looked directly toward the cameras. "I would tell him that power without accountability eventually becomes disconnected from the people it claims to serve." Several audience members nodded. "And I would tell him that titles do not automatically earn respect. Character does." Applause thundered through the auditorium once more. Alexander remained motionless. Then Evelyn delivered one final sentence. A sentence that landed harder than she could possibly know. "The Alpha King represents everything that needs to change." As the crowd erupted around her, Alexander lowered his gaze for the first time. His daughter had spent her entire life searching for a better future, and she believed he was standing in the way of it. "You wanted 5 minutes. You have exactly 5. Evelyn did not sit down. She stood beside a small table near the corner of a downtown cafe, arms folded, blue eyes sharp with suspicion. Across from her, Alexander Blackthorne slowly lowered the newspaper he had been pretending to read. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the afternoon crowd barely noticed the two strangers. That was intentional. Alexander had arranged the meeting through one of Evelyn's colleagues without revealing his identity. He needed to speak to her. Not as a king. Not yet. Just as a man searching for answers. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I am not here for thanks." Her response came immediately. "I am here because Rachel insisted you had information about my mother." Alexander felt his chest tighten. Grace. Even hearing someone else say her name still carried weight. Evelyn remained standing. "Well," she asked. "What information?" Alexander studied her carefully. Up close, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same determined expression. The same intelligent eyes. The same habit of lifting one eyebrow when she doubted someone. It was like looking into a living memory. "You cared about her very much?" he said quietly. "Of course I did." Evelyn's voice softened slightly. "She raised me by herself." Alexander looked down for a moment. What was she like? The question surprised her. "You asked me here to ask questions?" "Please." Something in his tone caused her to hesitate. Slowly, she pulled out a chair and sat down. She was the strongest person I ever knew. A small smile appeared. "She worked 2 jobs when I was growing up. She volunteered on weekends. She somehow found time to help everyone around her." Alexander listened without interrupting. Every word felt precious. Every detail was a piece of a life he had never seen. "She never complained," Evelyn continued, "even when things were difficult." "Did she ever talk about your father?" The smile disappeared. Instantly, Evelyn leaned back. Her expression closed. "Not much." "Why?" "Because he abandoned us." The answer landed like a stone. Alexander remained silent. "At least that is what I assumed." Evelyn looked out the window. She never spoke badly about him. That was the strange part. "You never asked?" "I asked all the time when I was younger." A sad laugh escaped her. "Eventually I stopped." The rain outside grew heavier. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn's attention shifted back to him. You still have not told me who you are. Alexander knew this moment would come. He had rehearsed dozens of explanations. None felt right now. My name is Alexander. She frowned. Just Alexander? For now. Evelyn stared at him. You are not very good at answering questions. To his surprise, the corner of his mouth almost lifted. I have been told that before. She studied him more carefully. Something about him seemed familiar. Not his face. Not his voice. Something deeper. A strange feeling she could not explain. Before she could identify it, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. I have to go. Alexander nodded. Of course. Evelyn stood and grabbed her coat. Then she paused. You knew my mother, did not you? Alexander looked directly into her eyes. Yes. Were you friends? The question hung between them. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth sat only inches away, waiting to be spoken. But not yet. Not here. Not like this. Evelyn watched him for another second before shaking her head. You know something you are not telling me. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Alexander remained seated as she disappeared into the rain. Only after she was gone did he notice the small notebook she had accidentally left behind on the table. Slowly, he reached for it. The first page contained a handwritten quote. One sentence. One belief she carried everywhere she went. Power means nothing if it cannot face the truth. Some truths are not buried by time. They are buried by people. Alexander read the sentence twice before setting Evelyn's notebook aside. It was nearly midnight. Rain still drifted against the palace windows, turning the city lights below into blurred streaks of gold and silver. Sleep was impossible. Every conversation with Evelyn left him carrying more questions than answers. For 22 years, he had believed Grace chose to leave. The evidence had seemed undeniable. Letters that stopped arriving. Witnesses who claimed she wanted nothing to do with royal life. Reports confirming she had disappeared. Back then, he had been young enough to accept the version of events placed in front of him. Now he was no longer certain of anything. Bring me every archived communication connected to Grace Carter, he ordered. His chief records officer hesitated. Every record, Your Majesty? Every record. 2 hours later, boxes filled an entire conference table inside a private archive room beneath the palace. Dust lingered in the air. Most kings never visited this level. Alexander had not entered it in years. One by one, he reviewed documents from more than 2 decades ago. Official reports, travel manifests, internal correspondence. Most appeared ordinary, until he noticed something strange. Dates. Tiny inconsistencies hidden between routine paperwork. A letter supposedly sent by Grace had been recorded 3 days before she could have physically mailed it. Another report referenced a meeting that never appeared anywhere else in palace records. Alexander's eyes narrowed. The deeper he looked, the less sense the story made. Shortly after 2 in the morning, he found the first undeniable discrepancy. A transportation log. Grace's name appeared on a departure record leaving North Haven. Yet the signature beside her name was not hers. He knew her handwriting. He had memorized it years ago. This signature was an imitation. Good enough to fool a clerk. Not good enough to fool him. A cold feeling settled in his chest. Who authorized this file? He asked. An archivist reviewed the document. His face turned pale. Lord Victor Hawthorne. Alexander slowly looked up. The name carried weight. 22 years ago, Victor Hawthorne had served as one of the most influential advisors in the kingdom. Trusted, respected, ambitious. Officially retired now, but still connected to powerful families throughout the territories. Alexander continued searching. More documents surfaced. More irregularities. Missing reports. Altered approvals. Entire sections removed from archived correspondence. Someone had not simply hidden information. Someone had carefully constructed an entirely different version of history. By dawn, a pattern had emerged. Every suspicious document passed through the same office. Every altered record traced back to the same chain of authority. Victor Hawthorne. Alexander leaned back in silence. The room suddenly felt smaller. 22 years. 22 years believing Grace had abandoned him. 22 years believing his daughter never existed. What if neither had been true? What if someone had decided the future of 3 lives without their knowledge? The thought made his chest tighten. Across the city, Evelyn began another ordinary morning completely unaware that pieces of her past were being uncovered one by one. She believed her mother had carried every burden alone. She believed her father had walked away. She believed the story she had inherited. Alexander stared at the growing stack of evidence. For the first time, he no longer doubted it. Grace had not left him. Someone had separated them. And the man whose name appeared on every trail of deception was still alive. If people knew what was hidden in these files, careers would end overnight. The investigator's voice was barely above a whisper. Alexander stood beside the conference table. As sunlight poured through the tall windows of the archive chamber, the kingdom outside was beginning another ordinary day. Inside the palace, nothing felt ordinary anymore. 3 independent investigators had spent the last 48 hours reviewing every document connected to Victor Hawthorne's office. The results were impossible to ignore. Records had been altered. Communications had been redirected. Entire reports had vanished. Every discovery pointed toward the same conclusion. Someone had worked very hard to ensure that Grace Carter disappeared from Alexander's life forever. How many people knew? Alexander asked. The lead investigator hesitated. We cannot be certain yet. Estimate. Very few. Whoever organized this wanted minimal exposure. Alexander stared at the evidence spread across the table. For years he had believed he understood the greatest mistakes of his life. Now he was discovering that some of those mistakes had never truly been his. Across town, Evelyn sat inside a community center preparing for an afternoon meeting. Volunteers moved through the building carrying folders and laptops. The atmosphere buzzed with energy. She should have been focused on the upcoming event. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to the strange man from the cafe. Alexander. Just Alexander. The memory irritated her. He clearly knew more than he admitted. Yet she could not explain why she felt drawn to uncover the truth. Earth to Evelyn. Rachel dropped into the chair beside her. You have been staring at that same page for 5 minutes. Evelyn sighed. Do you ever meet someone and immediately know they are hiding something? Rachel laughed. Every politician in the kingdom. Despite herself, Evelyn smiled. Then her phone vibrated. A new message appeared from an unknown number. Thank you for leaving your notebook. I would like to return it. Alexander. Her expression hardened. Who is it? Rachel asked. The mysterious stranger. The one connected to your mother? Evelyn nodded slowly. Meanwhile, inside the palace, another revelation surfaced. An investigator entered carrying a sealed folder recovered from a private storage facility once controlled by Victor. Hawthorne, you need to see this. Alexander opened the folder. Several photographs slid onto the table. Most showed Grace. Others showed locations he recognized. Then one image stopped him cold. Grace stood outside a small house holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. A baby no older than a few months. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten note. Evelyn, 6 months old. Alexander closed his eyes. For a moment, the room disappeared. 22 years. 22 birthdays. 22 Christmas mornings. 22 years of memories he would never get back. The investigator pointed toward another document. There is more. Alexander unfolded the page. It contained correspondence between Victor Hawthorne and several influential figures. One line immediately caught his attention. The child must never be connected to the throne. Silence filled the room. The investigators exchanged uneasy glances. Alexander read the sentence again. This had never been about Grace alone. It had been about Evelyn. Someone had viewed her existence as a threat. Someone had decided she could not be allowed near the royal family. His jaw tightened. Not from anger. From realization. If the truth became public, everything would change. The monarchy. The succession. The balance of power inside the kingdom. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her, Evelyn agreed to meet Alexander one more time. Some people spend their entire lives searching for answers, Evelyn said as she sat across from Alexander. I have a feeling you already found yours. The meeting took place in a quiet botanical conservatory on the edge of North Haven. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling above them. Exotic plants filled the air with the scent of pine and fresh earth. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, tension lingered between them like an invisible wall. Alexander carefully placed Evelyn's notebook on the table. You left this behind. She accepted it with a nod. Thank you. Neither spoke for several seconds. Around them, visitors wandered through the gardens, unaware of the significance of the conversation unfolding nearby. Evelyn finally broke the silence. You said you knew my mother. Alexander looked down briefly. I knew her very well. How well? He could hear the suspicion in her voice. The same suspicion he had earned without ever meeting her. She was one of the most important people in my life. Evelyn studied him. Something about the sadness in his eyes seemed genuine. That only made her more uncomfortable. Then why have I never heard your name before? She asked. Alexander did not answer immediately. He had imagined this moment countless times over the past week. None of those imagined conversations had prepared him for the reality. Before he could speak, his phone vibrated. A message from the investigative team appeared on the screen. Urgent. Additional records discovered. Confirmation obtained. Alexander read the message once. Then again. His heartbeat slowed. The final piece had fallen into place. There was no uncertainty left. No remaining doubt. Evelyn noticed the change in his expression. What happened? She asked. Alexander locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Nothing that cannot wait. But the truth could not wait much longer. Across the city, investigators continued sorting through decades of hidden records. One document after another confirmed the same story. Grace had tried to reach him. Multiple times. Letters had been intercepted. Messages had disappeared. Requests for meetings had never reached their destination. Someone had built an invisible barrier between two people and maintained it for more than 20 years. Back inside the conservatory, Evelyn leaned forward. You keep looking at me like you know something. Alexander met her gaze. Because I do. Then tell me. The words came sharper than she intended. Tell me why you wanted to meet. Tell me why you keep asking about my mother. Tell me why it feels like every answer leads back to you. Alexander looked beyond her for a moment. Through the glass walls, children played near a fountain. Families walked together beneath the afternoon sun. Ordinary moments. Precious moments. The kind he had missed. Slowly, he returned his attention to Evelyn. Your mother loved you very much. Her expression softened immediately. I know. Everything she did was to protect you. Evelyn nodded. I know that too. Alexander took a slow breath. There is something else she wanted you to know. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. For the first time since meeting him, she was afraid of the answer. What? She whispered. Alexander opened his wallet and carefully removed the photograph investigators had recovered the day before. The picture showed Grace holding a 6-month-old baby outside a small house. He placed it gently on the table between them. Evelyn stared at the image. It was one she had never seen before. Then she noticed something written on the back in her mother's handwriting. My beautiful Evelyn. One day, I hope your father finds you. My father finds you. Evelyn read the words again. Then a third time. The conservatory around her seemed to fade into the background. Conversations became distant. The sound of the fountain softened into a blur. Her entire attention fixed on the photograph resting between them. She recognized her mother's handwriting instantly. Every curve of every letter. Every detail. There was no possibility of mistake. Slowly, she lifted her eyes toward Alexander. What does this mean? Her voice was barely audible. Alexander had faced political crises, territorial disputes, and decisions that affected millions. None of them had prepared him for this moment. It means your mother never wanted us separated. Evelyn stared at him. Us. The single word hung heavily between them. Alexander felt his chest tighten. For weeks he had searched for the right way to say it. The perfect explanation. The perfect timing. Now he understood there was no perfect version of this conversation. There was only the truth. Evelyn, he said quietly. I believe I am your father. Silence. Complete silence. Even the air seemed still. Evelyn blinked once. Then again, as if her mind had refused to process the words. No, it came out automatically. No, that is impossible. Alexander did not argue. He simply reached into his briefcase and removed a folder. Inside were copies of recovered letters, photographs, archived records, and investigative findings. I thought so, too, he admitted. For many years. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Page after page revealed pieces of a story she had never known existed. Letters her mother had written but never received replies to. Requests for meetings that disappeared. Records proving communications had been intercepted. Evidence showing that someone had deliberately prevented contact between two people. Her eyes moved faster with each page. Confusion turned into disbelief. Disbelief turned into something more complicated. This cannot be real. Alexander watched the emotions cross her face. He wanted to comfort her, to explain everything. But he knew he had not earned that right. Not yet. I did not know you existed, he said softly. If I had known, I would have found you. Evelyn looked up sharply. How can I possibly believe that? The question carried years of hurt, years of assumptions, years of unanswered questions. Alexander accepted every bit of it. You do not have to believe me today. His voice remained steady. You do not have to forgive me. You do not have to call me anything. Evelyn closed the folder. Her breathing felt uneven. Everything she believed about her past had shifted in less than 10 minutes. You are telling me the Alpha King is my father? Yes. She looked away immediately. Her thoughts raced. Every speech she had given, every criticism she had made, every public statement. The man she had spent years opposing was now sitting across from her. Worse, part of her wanted him to be lying. Because if he was telling the truth, then her entire understanding of her family had been built on an illusion. Alexander reached into the folder one final time and removed a sealed envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. Grace's name appeared on the front. We found this hidden with the other records, he said. It was addressed to both of us. Evelyn stared at the envelope. Alexander had not opened it. Neither of them knew what was inside. For the first time since learning the truth, both father and daughter found themselves afraid of the same thing. What Grace's final words might reveal. If you are reading this, then the truth finally found its way home. Evelyn's eyes locked on the first line. Across from her, Alexander remained silent as she carefully unfolded the aged letter. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. Not because of the breeze drifting through the conservatory, because somewhere deep inside, she already sensed that her life was about to change again. Grace's handwriting flowed across the page with familiar warmth. It felt like hearing her voice after years of silence. Alexander, if this letter reaches you, then someone has failed to keep us apart. I pray that day comes. Not for me, but for our daughter. Evelyn swallowed hard. Her mother had written those words more than 2 decades ago, long before she could understand them, long before she even knew what had been taken from her family. She continued reading. I never stopped loving you. I never chose to leave. Every attempt I made to reach you disappeared. Every message vanished. At first I thought you had abandoned us. Later, I realized someone wanted us to believe exactly that. Evelyn paused. Her vision blurred. Alexander lowered his gaze. For years he had imagined countless explanations. None hurt quite as much as the truth. I wanted Evelyn to grow up free from bitterness. The letter continued. That is why I never spoke badly about her father. I could not prove what happened, but in my heart I never believed you willingly turned away from us. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek before she could stop it. Memories surfaced one after another. Her mother working late into the night. Her mother smiling despite exhaustion. Her mother refusing to answer questions about the past. Not because she hated Alexander. Because she had protected hope. Even when she had every reason not to. Evelyn turned to the final page. If one day Evelyn meets her father, please tell her this. The measure of a person is not the mistakes they inherit. It is what they choose to do after learning the truth. Do not let anger become your home. Life is too short for that. The letter ended with a simple signature. Grace. Nothing more. Nothing less. Evelyn slowly lowered the pages. The conservatory felt quiet, peaceful. Yet inside her, an entire world had shifted. For years, she had carried certainty. Certainty that her father abandoned her. Certainty that her mother had faced everything alone. Certainty that the past was simple. Now she understood none of it had been simple. Across the table, Alexander waited. Not demanding forgiveness. Not offering excuses. Just waiting. Evelyn studied him carefully. For the first time, she noticed the exhaustion behind his eyes. The sadness he never quite managed to hide. The regret that seemed woven into every word he spoke. 22 years had stolen things from both of them. Neither could recover what was lost. Neither could change history. But perhaps history was not the only thing that mattered anymore. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Then she looked directly at Alexander. My mother believed you would find me. Alexander nodded once. Unable to trust his voice, Evelyn took a slow breath. I am not ready to forgive everything. Her words were honest. Necessary. But I do not think I hate you anymore. For a moment, neither moved. Then, for the first time since learning the truth, Alexander allowed himself to hope. The future does not belong to the people who never made mistakes. It belongs to the people willing to learn from them. The words appeared on a banner hanging above the community forum stage. Evelyn stood behind the curtain reading them while hundreds of attendees filled the auditorium beyond. 6 weeks had passed since the letter. 6 weeks since the truth had finally emerged. The kingdom had learned what investigators uncovered. Victor Hawthorne's role in the deception had been publicly documented. Archived records were released. Hidden correspondence was verified. For the first time in more than 20 years, the full story belonged to the public instead of a locked archive. Yet none of that was what made Evelyn nervous. A volunteer approached. "They are ready." She nodded. Across the building, Alexander waited in a small conference room. He no longer felt like the man who had first opened Grace's letter. Something inside him had changed. Not because he had recovered what was lost. That would never happen. But because he had finally stopped running from the truth. A soft knock sounded. "Your Majesty." Alexander looked up. Evelyn stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she smiled. It was a small smile. Careful. Genuine. "They are waiting for us." Us. The words settled warmly in his chest. Together they walked toward the stage. The audience rose as they appeared. Cameras flashed. Reporters prepared questions. Community leaders, students, families, and officials watched in anticipation. Months earlier, Evelyn would never have imagined standing beside the Alpha King. Alexander would never have imagined sharing a stage with the daughter he never knew existed. Life had rewritten both of their stories. Evelyn stepped to the microphone first. The room gradually became quiet. "For most of my life," she began, "I believed I knew exactly who my father was. I believed I knew exactly what he represented." She glanced toward Alexander. "I was wrong about some things. He was wrong about some things too." Light laughter moved through the crowd. "The truth is complicated. Families are complicated. People are complicated." She paused. "But truth matters. Accountability matters. And what we choose after discovering the truth matters most of all." Applause filled the auditorium. Alexander approached the microphone next. He looked across the audience before speaking. "I spent many years believing leadership meant having answers." His voice remained calm. "What I learned is that leadership also means admitting when you do not." The room listened carefully. "I cannot recover 22 years. I cannot change the past. But I can honor it by building something better moving forward." When the applause finally faded, Evelyn turned toward him. There were still difficult conversations ahead. Still years of memories to create. Still trust to rebuild. But for the first time, the future felt larger than the pain behind them. As the event concluded and people began leaving their seats, Alexander quietly asked, "Would you like to have dinner tomorrow?" Evelyn pretended to consider it. "Only if you promise not to talk like a king the entire time." A rare laugh escaped him. "I can try." She nodded. "Good. Then it is a date." Father and daughter walked toward the exit together as evening sunlight streamed through the windows. They could not reclaim the years they had lost, but they no longer needed to. Tomorrow was waiting, and for the first time, they would meet it together.